The rain in Oak Haven, Ohio has a specific rhythm. It's a steady, rhythmic drumming against the window pane that used to promise security. My name is Elias Thorne. For 12 years, I was a man who lived by the rules of physics. As a structural engineer, I knew that if the foundation was solid and the load-bearing walls were reinforced, the structure would hold. I applied that same logic to my marriage with Sarah. We were the envy of our social circle. Sarah was a high-end stager, a woman who could walk into a cold, empty house and with a few strategically placed silk pillows and a specific scent of vanilla, make a millionaire feel like they were home. We had it all. The restored 1920s craftsman with the original crown molding, the respect of our neighbors, and a future that looked as bright as a summer morning on Lake Erie. I spent my days ensuring the safety of the city's bridges, and my nights ensuring Sarah had everything she ever dreamed of. I thought our love was a bridge built to last a century. I didn't realize she was looking for an exit ramp. Before we go deeper into this story, take a second and hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and let us know where you're watching from. I'm curious to know how far these stories travel. Welcome to Family Secrets and Revenge. In engineering, we study creep, the slow, permanent deformation of a material under constant stress. It's invisible until the whole beam snaps. Our marriage started to creep when Sarah took a contract with a luxury developer in Chicago. Suddenly, our quiet nights were replaced by her staring at a glowing screen, whispering into the phone in the hallway. She stopped asking about my day. She stopped noticing the little things I did to keep our home perfect. When I tried to hold her, she felt like a statue, cold and waiting for the museum to close. I blamed myself. I thought I wasn't providing enough of the sparkle she saw in the big city. So I took on more work. I stayed up until 3 a.m. drafting plans for the Hamilton bypass, all to buy her the life I thought she wanted. I was reinforcing a structure she was already planning to demolish. I would work myself to the bone, thinking that a new kitchen remodel or a luxury vacation would fix the hollow look in her eyes. I was a man obsessed with stability, blind to the fact that my wife was craving a storm. I first met Julian at a corporate gala Sarah insisted we attend. He was everything I wasn't. He didn't have grease under his fingernails or a crease in his brow from worrying about load-bearing capacities. He was a venture capitalist, a man who made money by moving numbers on a screen. He looked at my wife like she was a piece of prime real estate he was looking to flip. "Elias, isn't he fascinating?" Sarah had said on the drive home. "Julian says the world is divided into builders and owners. He says builders work for the owners." I laughed it off then. I didn't realize Julian wasn't just talking about business. He was talking about me. He was the owner, and I was just the man who had spent a decade building the woman he was about to steal. I saw the way his hand lingered on her waist, and I chose to trust her. I chose to believe in the foundation I had built. That was my first mistake. The collapse happened on a Tuesday in November. I remember the smell of wet pavement and decaying leaves. I had finished the Hamilton contract early and stopped at a jeweler's to pick up a necklace, a small bridge of white gold and diamonds to celebrate our anniversary. I walked into the house and the silence was heavy. There were 3 designer suitcases by the door. Sarah was standing by the window. "Julian is coming for me at 6, she said. No preamble. "I'm moving to Chicago, Elias. I've reached my limit here. This town, this house, it's all so small. Julian says I'm a queen without a throne. He's giving me the world." I stood there holding a box of diamonds, watching the woman I'd built a life for treat me like a piece of old furniture she was leaving on the curb for the trash man. The silver sports car pulled into our driveway, and just like that, the last 10 years were towed away. The divorce wasn't a legal proceeding, it was a vivisection. Sarah didn't just want to leave, she wanted to ensure I couldn't follow. Backed by Julian's money, her legal team was relentless. The conference room was on the 44th floor of a glass tower in downtown Chicago. It was Julian's territory. The table was a single slab of polished black granite, so cold it seemed to pull the heat right out of my palms. Sarah sat across from me, flanked by 2 men in suits that cost more than my entire first year of college. She wouldn't look at me. Her lead attorney, a man named Sterling with teeth like a row of white tombstones, leaned forward. "Mr. Thorne, let's discuss the Thorne Engineering brand." Our client, Sarah, one provided the aesthetic direction, the social networking, and the client-facing vibe that allowed a humble bridge inspector like yourself to bill six figures, correct? I am a structural engineer, I said, my voice sounding like gravel. I calculate load-bearing capacities so people don't die. Sarah picked the paint for the office. Sterling smiled. We have a dozen witnesses who say she was the silent partner in every deal. We're asking for 40% of the firm's valuation, the Oak Haven property, and 3 years of alimony. I watched as her lawyers picked apart my bank statements, making it look like I had squandered our wealth. By the time the judge signed the final decree, I was a man with a suitcase, an old dog, and a debt that would take 5 years to pay off. Before we continue, take a second and share your thoughts so far on this story below. I read every single one. Have you ever felt the sting of someone you love treating your shared history like it was nothing but a stepping stone? I moved into a studio apartment above a transmission shop in a part of Columbus where the streetlights were usually broken. The floor tilted, and the air always tasted like burnt oil. My dog, Jasper, didn't understand why we didn't have a yard anymore. He'd sit by the door, waiting for a walk that used to lead to a park, but now only led to an alleyway filled with trash. I spent the first month in shock. I was 42 years old, and I was starting over with nothing but a mattress on the floor and a burning sense of shame. I would lie there at night listening to the pneumatic wrenches screaming downstairs and the sound of other people's problems being fixed while mine felt irreparable. I realized that the better life Sarah wanted was based on appearance. I decided my better life would be based on the one thing she couldn't fake: forensic accuracy. I started taking the garbage jobs, the insurance claims for flooded basements, and structural assessments of condemned barns. Every crawl space I investigated was a brick in the wall I was building around my future. My big break came during the Great Bypass failure of 2024. A multi-million-dollar bridge project in Cincinnati had developed hairline fractures. The original firm, a massive conglomerate Julian had ties to, claimed it was unavoidable. I spent my last $1,000 on a specialized acoustic emission sensor. I spent 4 nights camped out under that bridge, listening to the steel talk. I found it. A metallurgical flaw in the bolts, cheaper steel imported to save a few bucks. I wrote a 40-page report that was so precise it was undeniable. That report didn't just save the bridge, it destroyed the conglomerate that built it. Within a month, my name went from the guy who lost his wife to the man who sees through steel. The very people who had shunned me during my divorce were now lining up to pay my retainer. I wasn't just back, I was untouchable. In the age of social media, you can't just lose someone. You have to watch them thrive. I'd see the posts. Julian and Sarah at a charity auction in the Maldives. Sarah in a penthouse that cost more than my entire neighborhood. Every photo was a knife to the ribs. I saw her wearing the necklace I'd bought her, laughing while Julian poured her champagne. I'd be at a high-level meeting with city officials, and for a split second, I'd think about calling her to tell her the news. Then I'd remember the silver sports car. I began to treat my own emotions like a load-bearing structure. If a thought didn't contribute to my stability, I discarded it. My loft wasn't just a home, it was a manifestation of that efficiency. When I finally hit 7 figures, I didn't buy a yacht. I bought the transmission shop where I'd spent my darkest year and turned it into a community center. I wanted to overwrite the geography of my pain with monuments to my progress. Before we go deeper, I would love to hear your point of view. Tell me what part hit you the hardest in my story and share your thoughts in the comments. Does success feel sweeter when it's built out of the ashes of a betrayal? Success brings you back into certain circles. I started hearing whispers. Julian's venture firm wasn't a fountain of wealth. It was an elaborate plumbing system. He was taking money from one person to pay another. The better life Sarah had traded me for was built on a sinkhole. I sat in high-end bars where developers talk shop, hearing about how Julian's Chicago permits were being frozen, how the visionary was missing meetings. I remember sitting in my office when the news broke. Federal marshals seize assets of Julian Group. I saw a clip of them hauling boxes out of their penthouse. Julian was being led away in handcuffs. Sarah was in the background, screaming at a cameraman, Her face twisted in terror. She wasn't a queen anymore. She was a liability. I didn't feel joy. I just felt the cold satisfaction of an engineer who had predicted a structural collapse years before the first brick fell. For the next year, I watched the legal fallout from afar. Julian's assets were liquidated. The yacht, the cars, the jewelry. It all went back to the people he had defrauded. And Sarah? She was a co-signer on half of it. She didn't just lose the better life, she inherited the debt of a criminal. I stayed focused. I expanded Thorne Forensic to 3 cities. I became the person who decided which buildings lived and which died. I built a life of absolute autonomy. I didn't need a partner to stage my success. My success was in the steel and the stone. I was the master of my own environment, living in a loft that felt more like a sanctuary than a home. I had achieved the better life through sweat. Oh, while she had tried to buy it with someone else's soul. It was a Tuesday, always a Tuesday. The rain was coming down in sheets, a classic Ohio deluge that turned the streets into black mirrors. I was sitting at my drafting table when a knock came at the door. It was a rhythmic, desperate thud. I checked the security monitor. A woman was huddled under the entryway light. She was drenched, her hair matted, wearing a coat that looked 3 sizes too big. I walked to the door and pulled it open. The smell of wet pavement and desperation rushed in. It was Sarah. But she didn't look like a queen anymore. She looked like a beggar. We didn't speak for a long time. I just watched the water run off her nose and drip onto my floor. The silence was heavier than the storm outside. "Elias," she finally whispered. Her voice was thin, like paper. I have nowhere else. They took the car. They took the apartment. Julian, he went out the back door when the feds arrived. He didn't even leave a note. He used our divorce settlement to buy a boat in the Caymans that was in his mother's name. I have nothing. I went to the old house, she sobbed. The people there threatened to call the police. I walked for hours to find you. I looked at her, and for a moment I saw the girl I had married. But then I saw the woman who had sat in a courtroom and tried to take my livelihood. "You have exactly what you chose, Sarah," I said. My voice was flat, clinical. I was analyzing her like a failed bridge. I led her to the foyer, but I kept my body between her and the rest of my life. I didn't want her shadow falling on my blueprints. She looked around my loft, her eyes wide with envy. You did all this without me," she whispered. "I thought I was finally becoming the person I was meant to be." "You were meant to be the person who stood by the man who loved you," I said. "But you decided that being wasn't enough. You wanted to have. And now that you don't have, you don't know how to be." She looked at the polished concrete, at the books, at the life of a big man she had once mocked. She was a ghost in a house she could never inhabit. Elias, looking at Sarah now, realizing that her better life was just a long con she fell for, would you feel pity or would you feel justice? If you were in my shoes, facing a situation like this, what would you do? Share your thoughts in the comments. "I spent 10 years making sure you never felt a cold breeze, Sarah," I said. I built a foundation so deep you could have lived on it forever. But you wanted the view from the top floor of a house of cards." I walked to the kitchen and grabbed a protein bar and a bottle of water. I handed them to her. She looked at them like they were holy relics. "I made a mistake, Elias. I see that now. You're the only real thing I ever had. Please, let me stay. I'll sleep on the floor. I just can't go back out there. It's so cold." She was shaking, the kind of deep internal cold that comes from having no place in the world. I looked at her, and I felt nothing. No hate, no love, just the clarity of an engineer. "Put the coat on, Sarah," I said, handing her my heavy work parka. "It's a 3-block walk to the St. Jude's shelter. They have beds and they'll give you a warm meal." She looked at me in shock. You're sending me to a shelter?" "I'm giving you a chance to build your own life," I replied. "Just like I had to. I'm not your safety net anymore. You wanted to be independent? This is what it looks like. It starts with a warm coat and a place to sleep that you earned yourself." I wasn't being cruel. I was being consistent. The look on her face was pure agony. She realized that I wasn't being mean. I was being precise. I was treating her with the same cold logic she had used on me in Chicago. She had spent years telling me I was small, and now she was looking up at me from the bottom of a hole she had dug herself. She took the money I offered, $500 and the coat. She didn't say thank you. She just looked at the floor, the water from her hair dripping onto my floor. She turned toward the door. Her shoulders slumped under the weight of the parka. She walked back out into the rain. I watched her from the window as she struggled with the heavy coat, disappearing into the gray mist of downtown Columbus. I didn't feel a surge of triumph. I just felt finished. The project was over. The structure was finally cleared of the rot. I walked back to my desk, opened my blueprints for the new city stadium, and went back to work. The rain continued to fall, but inside everything was dry. Everything was solid. I had survived the collapse, and I had built something better in its place. I had learned that some things are meant to fall so that something unbreakable can be built in their place. Life doesn't give you what you want. It gives you what you build. Sarah thought she could skip the building phase and go straight to the penthouse. She learned the hard way that when you don't own the foundation, you're just a guest in someone else's dream. Elias Thorne didn't need a queen. He needed to be the architect of his own soul. Thank you so much for staying with me through this feature journey on family secrets and revenge. It's a reminder that while people can take your house and your money, they can never take your ability to rebuild from the dirt. If Elias's story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and share your overall thoughts on his final decision. Was he too cold, or was it the only way to protect his own peace? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. Until next time, stay strong and keep your foundation solid.